Twilight's World. Written by Groucho Pony. Read by no one and nobody. Chapter 8. A Spell for Dinner. Shall we get started? Please submit your request.
I'm tired and I'm thirsty. Wait, before we begin, could I trouble you for another cup of tea? I sort of lost the previous cup.
Mike started. Of course. I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking. Give me a moment. He stood up, taking away the 2 mugs that now contained cold tea. Next, he emptied them into the kitchen sink and placed the dirty mugs into a curious cabinet under the counter.
That's a strange location for the dirty cups. Wouldn't it be better to rinse them and leave them in the sink? Though I suppose they will need to be washed soon. Is there a special reason you are storing the dirty cups down there?
I was just putting them in the dishwasher, said Mike as he turned on the kettle. As she watched, he also did something to a second device, which lit itself up with several glowing lights. He must have recognized her puzzled expression because he began to explain further. A dishwasher is a machine for cleaning the dishes. It's pretty much a standard appliance in most homes nowadays.
At home, Twilight replied, I usually ask Spike to clean the dishes. Believe me, it's a manual process involving soap and water and lots of knee and fetlock grease. I don't have any magic for cleaning our dishes. How can your machine possibly do it?
I'm not too sure, but I believe it simply sprays high-pressure jets of hot water onto the dishes. After about an hour of such action, the food particles have either been blasted off or dissolved away by the chemicals in the detergent.
I see. Spike would love one of those. He hates getting his claws soaked. He says his scales start to swell and warp.
Spike has scales? What kind of pony has scales?
Well, Spike's not a pony. He's a dragon, and my #1 assistant. But actually, he's sort of like my little brother. When I was a little filly, I hatched him from his egg. With Princess Celestia's help, I've been looking after him ever since.
Twilight saw a ridiculous expression appear on Mike's face.
What's up with that look? Is something wrong? Do you have a problem with Spike's being a dragon?
No, just ignore me. It's nothing really.
Please, tell me. We shouldn't allow any more surprises to creep up on us.
Well, it's kind of silly, Mike began. Just a stupid thought. But when you said that you hatched Spike from his egg, I kind of had a mental picture of you sitting on a huge egg. You're not by any chance oviparous, are you? I mean, you do have wings. Twilight felt her jaw drop momentarily, before she succumbed to a fit of giggles.
You're right. That's ridiculous.
More giggles ensued as she imagined herself, a little filly, perched upon Spike's egg.
And no, I'm not oviparous either.
Twilight soon recovered her composure and began explaining.
Hatching that dragon's egg was part of my entrance exam for Celestia's School for Gifted Unicorns. I hatched him with my magic.
Really? They use dragon eggs as the subjects for a magical entrance exam?
Well, yes. And I'm very glad I got to know Spike that day. You should have seen him sucking on his tail. He was so cute.
Mike, however, did not smile. Twilight, I'm concerned. My ethical senses are tingling. As a duly self-appointed ethical approval authority, I have to question the propriety of subjecting a sapient being, in his prenatal state, to random and potentially harmful magics. Why was the dragon egg not in the proper care of his mother?
His ethical sense? Tingling? He almost makes sense, but it doesn't make any sense. And is he accusing me of something? I didn't hurt Spike. He came to no harm, and as for his mother,
Twilight paused for a moment.
As near as we can tell, Spike's egg was orphaned.
I'm glad to hear you didn't harm him, but you could have. Were you so sure your magic would work flawlessly?
No, I didn't know the first thing about hatching a dragon's egg. And then there was that uncontrollable magic surge.
Twilight's thoughts suddenly came to a dramatic halt.
Oh, Spike! I'm so sorry! I didn't realize it put you at risk.
Twilight suddenly found herself crying silent tears. And then there were other potential candidates for the entrance exam, Mike continued. How might they have affected Spike? He paused, his voice taking on a gentler tone. I'm not blaming you, Twilight. You said you were a little filly when you hatched Spike, correct? She nodded. Then the blame should be on the school and those examiners who treated another sapient being, and a minor at that, so callously.
He's right. I must confront those examiners as soon as... I have no idea who they were. Mike?
Yeah? Suddenly the kettle clicked. Go on, I'm listening, Mike said as he turned away from her and busied himself with pouring a new cup of tea.
It suddenly occurred to me that I never saw those 4 examiners again. I mean, over the next 3 years, I got to know all the professors and lecturers at CSGU, but I never met any of those examiners ever again. I have to wonder if Princess Celestia hasn't already dealt with them. I never even suspected,
She added in a low murmur.
What they did was horrible. I realize that now. But why did Princess Celestia never tell me? Was it to protect me? Or perhaps she was protecting Spike?
Twilight's line of introspection was broken when Mike placed a saucer holding a mug of tea and a spoon in front of Twilight. He returned to the kitchen counter.
Oh, good. He gave me a spoon. That will make removing the tea bag much easier.
Keeping an eye on her steeping tea, she observed that Mike was again busy with something.
What are you doing now?
I'm just making myself a cup of coffee. It should be ready in a minute. Another set of strange noises assailed Twilight's ears.
That's another machine, no doubt. But what's coffee? Is Mike feeling ill? Are you feeling okay, Mike? You're not getting sick, are you?
No, I'm fine, he replied. Why do you ask?
You said something about a cough.
At that moment, the noises from the machine stopped, prompting Mike to turn towards it. When he turned around again, he was holding a steaming mug. Coffee. It's the name of this drink I'm holding. Mike lifted up his mug for emphasis. Then he added, almost as an afterthought, by the way, your tea's starting to get dark.
Ah!
Twilight frantically fished the tea bag out with her spoon. Having narrowly averted disaster, she took a cautious sip. Her face beamed a radiant expression of satisfaction, after which she added 2 teaspoons of sugar. Somebody's enjoying their tea, Mike noted with amusement. Twilight glanced at Mike, but did not reply.
Of course I am, and I'm not going to let you bother me.
Tea had always had its own magic for Twilight. Her earlier agitation about Spike's treatment and Celestia's secrets was mellowing away. Mike removed a box from the refrigerator and poured something white into his mug. Twilight, did you ever see any other students at that CS place in the company of young or recently hatched dragons? Mike returned the box of white stuff to his refrigerator.
No, come to think of it, there were no other dragons. Spike was the only one, and it's called CSGU, which stands for Celestia School for Gifted Unicorns.
She couldn't help but correct Mike. Returning to his seat at the table, Mike took a sip of his drink. Is hatching dragon's eggs an easy task to accomplish?
Certainly not. I would have failed the test if I hadn't been startled into emitting an enormous magical surge. From what I know now, even a unicorn mage might find it challenging.
I could be wrong, Twilight. I certainly have no knowledge of your society. But if that had happened here on Earth, I would have to suspect that you were deliberately set up with a test you could not pass. Have you ever considered the possibility that you were supposed to fail that test?
What? But why? Mike's right, of course. I don't think any other unicorn was ever asked to hatch a dragon's egg. But that part about them setting me up to fail? I will need to investigate that. That is, if I can ever escape this story.
Twilight's musings were interrupted when Mike sat down across from her at the table, allowing her to catch a whiff of his drink.
Oh, what is that stuff he's drinking?
Her muzzle lifted and her nostrils quivered for a moment.
It smells like... I don't know what it smells like. But I have to know.
She narrowed her eyelids and stared Mike in the eyes.
I want to know what that is you're drinking. It's not something related to meat, is it?
No, it's not anything like that. It's coffee, made from beans. It's full of flavor and quite strong. Bitter, even. So I usually add some cream to moderate it. Cream is okay, isn't it?
Right. The coffee he told me about earlier. I must have forgotten. And cream.
Twilight relaxed her gaze.
Yes, cream is good.
She gave a tentative sniff in the direction of his cup.
It smells strangely enticing. Would you let me try a cup? Not right now, of course. I still have this tea.
You can try some tomorrow morning. Besides, I would not recommend drinking it at night.
But you are drinking it,
Twilight replied. That's because I know the effect that it has on me. It's not so late yet, and I want the extra alertness when we go out soon. Coffee's a natural stimulant. I expect to suffer some consequences later tonight.
Why? What does it do?
She asked, slightly alarmed. Nothing too bad. Coffee just has a tendency to keep people awake. I might find it difficult to fall asleep.
Oh, well then I definitely need to try some. Maybe it can help me when I stay up late doing my projects and assignments. But Celestia doesn't give me study assignments anymore. I miss those.
Twilight's thoughts began to take a melancholy turn. A brief silence ensued, as Twilight's thoughts dwelt on happier days. Suddenly it was broken as Mike returned to the business they had been discussing earlier. Well, we both have our drinks now, so let's get back to determining if you can ethically use your magic. Twilight, your proposal, please.
What? Oh, yes!
Twilight frowned, trying to remember the last time she had submitted such a request.
Well, Mr. Approver, sir, I would like to make use of the Clover Marehammer Third Order Horomorphic Glamour to disguise my appearance amongst other humans.
Clover Markham Third Order Horomorph. Mike struggled with the unfamiliar words. That's quite a mouthful. Could you please describe what the spell does?
Clover the Clever, a famous mage, and Marehammer, a famous spy, collaborated to create a series of horomorphic spells. A horomorphic spell manipulates the target's perception of their senses. The spell implants an animus into their mind that causes them to perceive an object as something else. For example, it could cause them to perceive an apple as an orange.
So if you put an apple in front of me, I would see an orange?
In the broadest sense, yes, you are correct. But you're missing the important part. Your eyes and brain will always see the apple. The apple has not changed. Your brain has not been altered. It is your mind that perceives the orange.
I'm still unclear on this. Brain, mind, isn't it the same thing?
Your body is separate and distinct from your mind. This spell only affects the mind's perception, not the body's.
Suppose I was asked to think of an apple. Would my mind end up thinking of an orange?
No, the spell's animus only affects your mind at the stage where the experience is initially perceived. Previous experiences of apples have become an integral part of your memory and won't be altered.
Okay, I think I got it now. But what about the third order part of the spell?
A first order spell is cast directly upon the subject and would make the subject generically see apples as oranges. A second order spell is cast upon the specific object and causes any pony who looks at that object to perceive it as directed by the spell's animus. A third order spell starts with either a first or a second order spell, but the animus is enhanced, providing exact details for what is to be perceived. For example, you would perceive a specific orange with readily identifiable attributes or markings distinguishing it from all other oranges.
Twilight took another sip from her tea and looked expectantly at Mike. Mike had been sitting quietly, apparently thinking. Suddenly, he shifted, becoming aware that Twilight was waiting for his response. He cleared his throat. Okay, Twilight, on the first issue concerning the subject's volition, I don't see this magic as having any direct effect upon it, although the magic could be used to influence the subject's decisions by carefully shaping their perceived environment. What really matters here are the specific details of what the subject perceives. Do the alterations to their perceptions lead the subjects to make choices they otherwise would not make, choices that are detrimental to themselves?
It shouldn't. The magic's animus will simply cause the subject to see me as a human mare.
The word you should use is woman, Mike corrected with a smile. Not mare. If they are young, the word girl would also be suitable.
Ponies also sometimes use girl. Thanks. The woman they perceive will move and act in a manner consistent with the local environment and my own activities. When I walk, they will see the woman walk. When I eat, they will see the woman eat, as humans eat. The subject's mind will supply the necessary details.
That should be interesting. Will they perceive the human you as being enhanced in any way? I have to ask because conspicuous or exaggerated body attributes could bring unnecessary attention.
He doesn't mean what I think he means, does he?
Twilight blushed.
I'm not vain about my human form. I wouldn't enhance it like that, but that doesn't mean it isn't enhanced already. I really don't know, Mike. All I have is a memory of what I would look like as a human.
After the briefest of pauses, she added,
It's from some research that I did earlier. Would you like to see?
Hold it! Mike interrupted, gesturing at her with a strange motion. He was holding his hand up, its flat side presented towards her face. Let's complete the rest of the ethical review before you try using any of that magic. If we can satisfy ourselves about the other two issues, we'll come back and evaluate your appearance.
That sounds reasonable,
she conceded. Mike paused, assuming a more serious mien. Now, concerning the issue of damages, the potential for causing damage is very high. This magic can easily manipulate subjects into performing actions that are injurious, even deadly to themselves and others. That might happen if they were unable to perceive something that was dangerous. But such dangers would only manifest as a result of malicious designs on your part. From your statement, I believe it's safe to assume your intentions are benign and not formulated with any purpose of manipulating the subject.
Mike paused, staring intently at Twilight. He had a serious look upon his face.
You're not an evil pony, are you?
What?
Twilight expostulated.
Of course not. I'm...
She fell silent as she saw a smirk form on Mike's face, and realized that he had been tweaking her. She glared back.
Ooh, he got me. I'll have to think of some way to get back at him.
Mike resumed his analysis. The final issue concerns the moral corruption of the magic user. As with the second issue, the risks are commensurate to the magic user's intentions. Here I see some danger to the magic user of their ego becoming inflated, even if their intent was to benefit the subject.
Benefiting the subject is harmful to the magic user?
If successfully manipulating the subject feeds your ego with a measure of satisfaction, then yes. The pursuit of such satisfaction could lead to continued manipulations.
I can see that. It's a little like what happened to Rainbow Dash. She did a good deed, and her ego became a monster. Mare Duel had to do some pretty serious intervention to save Rainbow from herself. We were all so glad when she returned to her senses. I understand. Something like that happened to one of my friends. She rescued some pony and got a swelled ego.
I'm glad you understand. The only safe way to use this magic is to keep all manipulation neutral. Ideally, the subject's actions remain unchanged. Now, you stated that the purpose of this magic is to conceal your true appearance, something which should not be the concern of humans other than myself. And you have no other objective, such as manipulating or benefiting other persons. Therefore, I deem this to be a neutral use of magic.
Mike grinned.
So, Twilight, you are granted provisional approval to use the clever Mark III, whatever. All that remains now is to show me how you will look before I can grant final approval.
Twilight closed her eyes, gathering her concentration. Mentally, she went through her checklist. Let's see. The Clover Marehammer Horomorphic Glamour. Got it. The counterspell is... just my normal dispersal magic will do. Second order, to be cast upon a body, which is myself. Third order, set up a matrix to impart specific details to the animus. And finally, I use my memory of what I looked like in the mirror world. Her horn, which had been glowing for the past few seconds, flashed brilliantly. Twilight opened her eyes to find Mike staring at her. His jaw had dropped open. This is just another one of those things, Mike. A smile appeared on her face. Twilight levitated her mug and took another sip of her tea. She grimaced. It was getting cold and had lost its appeal. So, how do I look? Mike shook himself, as if waking up from a trance.
Absolutely amazing! You appear so real and lifelike. Twilight, what I see is a young girl who is still recognizably you. I just saw you pick up your mug with your right hand. Am I mistaken? Did you actually transform into a girl?
No, I'm quite unchanged. I'm still an Alcorn.
Unbelievable. So lifelike. I can't tell it's not real. And I know it's not.
Mike rose from his seat, but continued to stare at Twilight. He walked around her to observe her from all sides. Do you see something wrong? She asked. Her head turned, tracking Mike as he walked around her.
A few things, he replied. The most noticeable is that you have a lavender skin tone.
What's wrong with my color?
It's not normal. No human has lavender skin. Could you change the image, make the skin color more like mine?
I could, but I think I'll let him make the changes. As Twilight called upon her magic, her horn flashed and then maintained a steady glow. Actually, you can make the changes yourself.
What? How am I supposed to do that?
I'm holding open the spell matrix for the perception animus. If you concentrate on what you desire, the animus's parameters will modify themselves accordingly, changing what you see.
So if I imagine that you have normal skin... Whoa! Now that is impressive!
Twilight sat there quietly, holding the spell matrix open while Mike paced around her like a hungry manticore.
Skin tone is good.
It was fine already. Mike, I can't imagine why anyone would have cared what color I was.
But the eyes are too large for a human. Make them smaller. A bit more. Just a tiny shade larger. Perfect.
Well, I knew Mike had smaller eyes, but what's wrong with mine? No pony mentioned them while I was in the mirror world.
I see that your hair still has the same color stripes as in your mane.
What? Don't tell me he's going to do away with my personal mane colors. She bristled inside, preparing for an argument.
You know what? I like those stripes. Let's leave them there. And I like your hairstyle too. Very pretty.
Mike's comment disarmed Twilight's growing indignation. You mean that? She asked.
Oh, yes. And even as a pony, I find your mane to be very pretty.
Twilight felt confused, yet strangely elated. She rarely got compliments about her appearance. Even rarity was more likely to suggest changing her look than to offer her compliments. She quelled her unsettling feelings by acknowledging Mike's compliment. Thank you.
Next thing we need to change is your age. Right now you look like an adolescent of about 15 years or so. Are you really that young?
No, I'm actually.
She started to reply, but Mike cut her off. Nothing wrong with that, but if we are to be seen together in social settings, it might be better that you appear to be older. Say about 20. No, still too young. Let's try 28. No. Somehow that age doesn't suit you. Let's go back to 22. There, that looks about right. You know, Twilight, these adjustments are simply fantastic. How do you make them so quickly and accurately?
I'm not. You are the one making the changes, Mike. Your mind is supplying the necessary details.
It's incredible. It's like I have a facial composition software in my head, only it works in living 3D.
Mike added a strange emphasis to his last few words. He's really getting too excited about this,
Twilight thought wryly.
And what's facial composition software? Mike, are you getting a swelled ego through your power over my appearance? Maybe I should end this right now.
Ooh, wait, sorry, Twilight. Maybe I have been enjoying this a little too much. But before you end this session, there are still some important things I must correct.
And what would those be?
She asked suspiciously. The problem is your clothing. Your image, needs to be dressed appropriately for our winter weather. Otherwise, you'll draw attention.
Okay, that makes sense.
All right. Now, what does a pretty 22-year-old woman wear in the winter? Okay, first, those tacky leg warmers. Now, change that poofy dress for some jeans. Purple? Why are the jeans purple? You know what? It works. We'll leave that color alone, but change that thin blouse for a pink sweater. Ugh. Cashmere, a little less fuzz, please.
I think I've created a monster,
Twilight mused.
He's as bad as Rarity.
She sighed, resigned to her fate as a magical ponyquin. But no more changes came. Mike just stood there staring critically at Twilight, or rather at her human image. Twilight, your human image looks good for indoor locations, but when going outside it's necessary to wear additional clothing such as boots and a coat. Can the spell manage that?
You can make the perceived image as detailed as you want,
she replied.
I thought you understood that.
You misunderstand. Your human image will need to don and doff a coat according to the ambient temperature. Not wearing a coat when outside in freezing weather will draw attention, as would be continuing to wear a coat when inside a warm building. Twilight considered the problem.
I could make two distinct glamours, one with a coat and one without. But no, that would expose me during the switchover. Could I wear a coat? No, my true appearance, wearing a coat or not, is obscured by the glamour. Oh, I know! I can cast the glamour of a coat onto some simple object that I wear. The image of the coat will follow that object, whether being worn or laid aside. Do you have a necklace or anything like that?
After brief consideration, Mike replied, I think I do. Wait here. Mike left the room. Twilight could hear his hoofsteps as he went downstairs to the basement. It was but another moment before he returned carrying a thin strap having a rectangular black stick dangling from it.
Is that some kind of necklace? If it is, it's rather ugly.
Here you go. This data stick came with a neck strap. You can use this. I don't need it.
Data stick?
Twilight asked as she levitated it out of his hand. As it settled over her neck, she was surprised at how light and comfortable the necklace felt.
Oh, I see. It's not jewelry. It's a textile strap designed for utility and comfort, rather than providing visual appeal.
The name refers to that black object dangling from your neck, Mike answered. It's a generic term referring to a certain class of data storage devices we use with our computers. I'll tell you all about data sticks and computers later, probably tomorrow. That's simply too enormous a subject to go into right now.
There he goes again, always deferring his explanations. Are you done with the changes in my human image, Mike? I need to close up the first control matrix before I create a new one.
Well, 1 second. There. I just gave your human self some stylish calf-link boots suitable for outdoor excursions and for wearing indoors at a restaurant. Okay, you can close the matrix now. Twilight did so, and proceeded to apply a third-order horomorphic glamour to the ugly necklace, setting it up with the image of her lab coat, that being the only coat she could think of at the moment. Twilight? Whatever you are wearing, it looks terrible. Twilight turned her head and glanced at her body, seeing it covered by her lab coat.
I wonder why Mike thinks something's wrong with it. I'm just wearing my lab coat, Mike. It looks fine to me. But if you don't like it, you can change it to something else.
Your lab coat? He asked incredulously. Then a look of comprehension took over his features. You mean your pony lab coat? Suddenly, Twilight realized she had made a mistake. She had given the lab coat's glamour specific parameters as to its size and appearance. Those were conflicting with the requirements of her human glamour. She sighed internally.
The control matrix is open, she offered, hoping to change the subject. You can change the coat at any time.
One stylish peacoat coming up, Mike declared with a smile. Suddenly, Twilight was engulfed by volumes of heavy-looking fabric. Hastily, she adjusted the spell matrix to exclude herself from its effects.
If a human wearing pony clothing looks bad,
she thought,
then a pony wearing human clothing is equally as ridiculous.
Mike, however, still wasn't done. Let's fix that color. And voila! Mike made a peculiar gesture, bringing his bunched fingers up to his pursed lips. C'est magnifique!
He is! He's like Rarity!
She couldn't help but smile at that reminder of her friend. Say, Twilight?
Yes? What is it?
Can you make it so that I'm excluded from the effects of these two glamours?
Easily. May I ask why?
Well, I've kind of gotten used to your true appearance, and I would prefer to get to know the real you, rather than some illusion. Especially since I had a hand in creating that illusion.
He wants to get to know the real me?
Twilight thought in wonder. She smiled at him.
Why, thank you, Mike. That's the nicest thing any pony has said to me all day long.
Mike had redonned his coat and was putting on some boots. Come on, Twilight, let's get going. I'm starving. Upon the mention of food, or rather the lack thereof, Twilight's stomach gave agreement in the form of a loud rumble.
Give me a break,
she thought.
It's like some kind of Pavlovian behavioral response.
Twilight followed Mike out the door. Upon exiting the house, the first thing she noticed was how dark it had become. Full night had fallen.
But it's only about 5 o'clock,
she thought. The second thing she noticed was the temperature. It had gotten considerably colder than it had been just a few hours ago. Mike approached his carriage and walked around to the opposite side, opening the door. I hope you can climb up and sit comfortably on the seat, Twilight. She looked dubiously at the opening.
I guess we won't know until I try.
Twilight placed her forehoofs firmly upon the seat. She kicked off with her hind legs and hopped in, managing a clean entry. Standing upon the seat with all four legs, she sat down carefully. Those seats were engineered for humans. How are they for you? Mike asked.
A little tight, she replied honestly. My tail is bent, and my forehoofs are too close to the front edge of the seat. They could slip off if the ride got bumpy.
Is it possible for you to lean back in the seat like a human would? Twilight recalled her experiences in the mirror world.
I think so. Let me try that.
Twilight tried leaning back, but quickly dropped forwards again as the pressure on her tail mounted.
I don't like tucking my tail between my legs and sitting on it, but I think it's the only way this might work.
With her tail between her legs, she tried leaning back again. This time she was successful.
Is this necessary, Mike? It's not too bad, but I wouldn't call this comfortable.
It's necessary because you should wear a seatbelt. It's the law. Having said that, is there anything I can do to improve your comfort?
The worst part is how the seat forces me to lean so far back. It puts added pressure on my tail.
Here, let me try adjusting the seats back.
Mike reached over and touched a control on the side of the seat's lower portion. Suddenly, Twilight found herself tilting forward as the back of the seat was raised. Stop! That's a little too far. Can you go back a little? Right there. Thanks, Mike. That's much more comfortable.
Okay, Twilight. I'm going to show you how to buckle yourself in. This, Mike pointed at a broad strap with an embedded metal tang, located to her right and somewhat behind her, is your seatbelt. To use it, simply pull forward in a smooth continuous motion, like so. Mike demonstrated, pulling out a great length of the seatbelt. Next, you take the tongue, Mike was holding the metal tang, and insert it into the buckle. Mike swiftly inserted the tongue into a strange protruding stalk located at Twilight's left side. Twilight heard a distinct click as it went in, and Mike let go of the belt. It snugged up against Twilight's body, startling her. Mike continued. To release the belt, simply depress this button located on the buckle. Mike proceeded to do so, pressing in a prominent orange-colored button. The seat belt was suddenly whipped away. She heard the metal tongue clatter as it struck the side of the carriage. For some reason, this caused Mike to wince, as if he were in pain. Now you try. Just when you do, try to keep the seat belt from retracting so violently.
I didn't do anything, Twilight protested.
I know, he replied. I'm just asking you to do better than me.
Strangely, Mike's reply pleased Twilight. She had always been a pony who owed up to her actions, and it seemed that Mike did too. She turned her attention to the seatbelt. This seems simple enough? An assumption Twilight proved by buckling and unbuckling herself several times. Observing her exercises, Mike chuckled.
You know, when I bought the truck earlier this year, I never would have imagined that one day a magical alien pony would be sitting in my front passenger seat.
Twilight simply looked back at him. What could she say? She was indeed sitting in his truck. Apparently finished with his self-amusement, Mike called out,
Watch yourself, I'm closing the door.
After doing so, Mike came around the carriage and climbed into the seat adjacent to Twilight's. Twilight observed Mike's actions carefully as he held up a ring of keys. One key in particular was larger than the rest. It fit into a lock mounted on the side of a strange mushroom growing out of the panel in front of him. A twist of the key, and the carriage started to produce a muted roar, even as she felt a faint vibration through her seat. Light bloomed in front of the carriage, illuminating the garage almost as brightly as daylight. Ooh, this is so exciting! Twilight gave a silent squeak. A whole new world of technology. I can't wait to find out the particulars of how it works. I've got to ask Mike for a quill and some paper. Yes, lots of paper. At first, Twilight found their motion confusing. The carriage started moving back, turning sharply to the right as it did so. Before she could ask Mike what was happening, the carriage stopped. Mike moved a large lever that was growing out of the side of the mushroom, and the carriage began moving forwards. Only now it was turning sharply to the left. Oh, he was simply getting the carriage turned around. But no, it's not a carriage. Mike said it was like a carriage, but he called it a truck. That's it, it's called a truck. They moved forward slowly, approaching a large gap in a line of trees. Just after passing the trees, the truck stopped. Why are we stopping?
Just making sure there's no oncoming traffic before moving onto the road.
With a roar, the truck turned to the right and started moving again, much faster now. Twilight could not see anything of the landscape outside the darkened cab. However, the road stretching in front of the truck was lit up in brilliant detail for a considerable distance. Is it okay if I ask you a few questions, Mike?
Ask away. I imagine you have quite a few by now.
Oh, I most certainly do, Twilight affirmed, almost gleefully. But let's start with this truck. What is its motive power?
It has an 8-cylinder internal combustion engine.
Internal combustion engine?
You know, expanding gases push against a piston, which turns a crank, which provides the rotary motion.
Oh, that sounds like our steam engines. We use them to power our trains.
Twilight, I'm pretty sure your spaceship runs on something better than steam power. You can't tell me you got to Earth with that level of technology.
What's wrong with our technology? It might not be as advanced as your generators and trucks and toasters, but I'll have you know that we are quite proud of our railroads and trains.
Mike seemed shocked. But you came here in a spaceship. That's so much more advanced than a steam locomotive.
What's this spaceship thing you keep talking about?
Twilight, you're an alien, not from this world. It's obvious that you came from another world, from some far off star system. You must have come in a spaceship of some kind. Or maybe you prefer to call it a starship?
I know quite a lot about the stars and other heavenly objects. I love to study the night sky and have spent many a night at my telescope doing observations. But I am quite unfamiliar with these things you call star systems and starships. What do the stars have to do with it? My question was about the internal combustion engine.
Instead of answering, Mike abruptly slowed the truck and brought it to a stop at the side of the road.
What's wrong? Why are we stopping?
Because I think we're about to have a huge revelatory discussion. I don't want to drive while being heavily distracted. It's not safe.
That's the only thing you've said recently that makes any sense.
Twilight, your question, what do the stars have to do with it, totally staggers me. Either you're putting on a massive act,
I'm doing nothing of the sort.
or there's a massive disconnect between our two worldviews.
I still don't understand. You still haven't answered my question.
Forget the engine for a moment. Twilight, it's about cosmology and our understanding of the universe. Let me begin with something simple. First off, the sun is a star, and all the other stars in the night sky are suns in their own right.
That's not right. Princess Luna makes the stars in the night sky.
Mike sighed. Please don't bring up mythological references. I'm trying to present scientific facts here.
Princess Luna is not mythological,
Twilight replied sharply.
She is the princess of the night. She raises and lowers the moon and the stars. I've personally stood by her side and watched her change the constellations. And Princess Celestia raises and lowers the sun. The sun is not a star.
That's ridiculous, Mike retorted. Nobody moves the sun. The world rotates on its axis, thereby giving the illusion that the sun revolves around it.
No, that's ridiculous,
Twilight thought.
Every pony knows the world is much bigger than the sun. Celestia does too move the sun. When she was abducted recently, the sun stopped moving through the sky. I ought to know. I was there. I was even instrumental in finding and rescuing her. According to various clocks, several days passed before the sun, moon, and stars were moving on a schedule again.
Mike sighed and dropped his head onto the mushroom. Several long moments passed before he raised it again. Twilight, you say you have personally witnessed such things. I'm not going to dispute you, but believe me when I say that is not how things work here. Of this I am certain. We have so much scientific evidence that what I told you about our sun and stars is considered irrefutable fact. I'm starting to think you come from another universe. One that is wholly different, having physical laws that radically diverge from our own.
Yes, I know. This is just a fictional universe, accidentally created by a misfire of that literary spell. I suppose anything can be true here.
Twilight hung her head, saddened by the turn the conversation had taken.
I know, Mike. I've known from the beginning that I'm not in my own universe. But until we had this conversation, I had no idea just how different it was from my own.
Mike was resting his head on the mushroom again. Eventually, Twilight became worried for his mental state and broke the silence.
Mike, now that we have established we are from different universes, perhaps you could tell me something about yours? You were telling me something about the stars and spaceships.
Several more moments passed until Mike sat up abruptly and set the truck in motion again. Well, I think the big shock is over. Maybe I can manage to drive while I explain some things.
I'm glad you're okay, Mike. I'll try not to distract you from your driving.
No need to restrain yourself, Twilight. Now that I know how different our perspectives are, I won't be so distracted by the very nature of your questions. The truck came to a stop again. Apparently the road they were on was crossing another road. She thought Mike was checking for oncoming vehicles again. Instead, the truck turned left onto the new road. Soon it had accelerated to quite an impressive speed, possibly twice as fast as an Earth pony at full gallop. Mike spoke up again. As I said earlier, the Sun is a star. There are several planets, including this Earth, which orbit the Sun.
Planets? Orbits?
Planets are heavenly bodies, large rocks basically, which revolve around the Sun. The Earth is an example of a planet. And orbit is just a technical word. It refers to the path a planet takes as it revolves around the Sun. As I was saying, the stars are suns in their own right, and they, in turn, have their own planets.
So you're saying that each star would have worlds, just like this Earth?
Well, not every star. Every star may well have planets, but our current theories would have the formation of an Earth-like planet to be a rare occurrence.
Why would they be rare?
Well, for one thing, Twilight noticed that Mike's voice sounded much more relaxed now. Apparently, he enjoyed expositing on his cosmology. The planet's orbit has to lie within a certain distance from its sun. Too close and the planet boils from the heat, too far away and the planet is cold and frozen. A second factor is the size of the planet. Too small and it has insufficient gravity to retain a breathable atmosphere. Too large and the greater gravity would retain a thick, dense atmosphere, so heavy it would cause the world to overheat.
So the Earth is of an ideal size and in the ideal location.
Actually, the Earth is too large to be habitable. There is a neighboring planet, Venus, which is only slightly smaller than Earth. But Venus has a thick, heavy atmosphere that holds in the heat all too well. Its surface temperature is hot enough to melt lead. The current theory is that the Moon, which orbits the Earth, has helped to strip off most of that thick, heavy atmosphere, making the Earth habitable. Venus has no moon, and remains inhospitable to life.
This may be a fictional universe, but I bet Luna would love to hear that story.
Twilight, following along with great interest, spoke up.
So you have three factors: distance from the sun, the size of the world, and the presence of a moon as contributing factors determining its habitability. I shouldn't wonder that Earth-like planets must be rare.
That's right, and though they are rare, when you consider how many stars there are, it is reasonable to assume there's a good number of them out there. Twilight, ever since I first met you, my assumption was that you had come from such a world. Mike gave her a huge grin. You know, we humans have written a great deal of speculative fiction about exploring those worlds among the stars, about coming in contact with beings from those other worlds.
Fiction? You mean you have not traveled to those worlds? You don't know if other worlds even exist?
Oh, we know they exist. Our telescopes have been able to detect thousands of planets orbiting those stars. Sadly, our telescopes only have the sensitivity to detect the larger planets, ones which are much larger than our own Earth.
But you haven't traveled to them.
Well, humans have traveled to the moon. It was a huge undertaking, and the whole world celebrated that achievement. But we have not traveled any further. The distances are too extreme.
Well, Luna has been to her own moon, so I don't think that achievement is quite so extraordinary. What kind of distances are we talking about?
I believe the closest star is Proxima Centauri. It's about 4 light years distance.
Light years? I've never before heard of that measure.
Light year is the distance light travels in a year.
Wait, light? Light has a speed of approximately 186,000 miles per second. And a whole year?
Twilight did a quick calculation.
That distance is insane! Impossible. That's 5.7 million miles. Nothing is that far distant. It vastly exceeds the size of the universe as we know it.
Maybe your universe, but our universe has an observable radius of about 13 billion of those light years. Twilight immediately worked out the distance in miles. She felt her thoughts sputtering as she tried and failed to comprehend the resulting number. Don't even bother trying to convert it to miles. Even a single light year is too vast a distance to comprehend. Just accept it as being the appropriate unit of measure when discussing stellar distances.
Are you reading my mind now?
No, of course not. But it's a common fallacy for people to attempt to convert an unfamiliar measure into something they are more comfortable with. I'm just giving you some helpful advice. Twilight, for the sake of argument, or rather for the sake of our not arguing, I provisionally accept that your universe is as you say it is. Can you accept that mine is as I have said?
Well, sure. This is, after all, a fictional universe. But why does it have such attributes? Why does it have such an inconceivable size? On the surface, everything else I have seen today appears normal. I need to solve this mystery. Fine. I'll suspend my disbelief for now, but I want to see that scientific evidence you mentioned earlier. And you still have not answered a single question.
Mike sighed. Right, your question. Well, I assumed you came from a planet circling some distant star, and knowing the distances involved, I further assumed that you had arrived in a ship, a spaceship, or starship, which was capable of conveying you over those vast distances. Such a starship would represent energies and technologies far exceeding our current capabilities. I was flabbergasted when you proudly claimed steam power as your technology.
Oh, well, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but it is.
Twilight suddenly realized that they had been passing by numerous buildings for a while, each with lights glowing or signs illuminated. She stopped talking in order to observe as much as she could about human habitations. Suddenly, Mike was slowing the truck, but did not bring it to a stop. Instead, they turned off the road and entered an open area situated before a building. There appeared to be 4 other carriages stopped in this area. She noted with interest that Mike drove his truck up into a gap between 2 of the other carriages. Sorry to interrupt, Twilight, but we're here. Everybody out, Mike announced. Immediately, Twilight released her seatbelt, but the door defeated her. She was about to call out to Mike for assistance, but caught sight of him pulling on a square-looking ring embedded in the side of his door. His door promptly popped open.
Oh, so that's how. Do I have one of those rings on my side? Yes, I do.
Using her magic, she found it quite easy to open her own door.
That lever is certainly not pony-friendly. It's difficult to grab with a hoof and impossible for one's mouth. Only a unicorn would be comfortable with it.
Clambering out, she found herself standing between Mike's truck and another carriage. She saw a large illuminated sign emplaced upon the building in front of them. Large green cursive letters shone out into the night, illuminating a considerable area. To her eyes, the sign's cursive letter styling distorted the message to the point of being almost illegible. After a moment of study, she came to the conclusion that it read, "Sinful Salads."
Finally, I might get something to eat.
Her stomach agreed, with a loud grumble.